Brought to you by 1AAuto.com, your source for quality replacement parts and the best service on the internet. In this video, we're going to show you how to remove and reinstall the front drive axle, or one side of the front drive axle. Obviously, the driver's side is the same. We're doing this on this 97 Expedition. This is the same process for a whole bunch of different Ford and Lincoln trucks and SUVs. Tools we used on this Expedition, if you're doing it on a different vehicle, some of the sizes may differ a little bit, but jack and jack stands, a large flat blade screwdriver, a 13mm 12-point socket, 9/16 14mm, 19mm, and a 35mm socket, ratchets and extensions. You'll need a breaker bar or a pipe for some extra leverage for some of those bolts, a hammer, punch, torque wrench, and possibly replacement stabilizer links, as those often break when you take them apart. Okay, so obviously you're going to start by removing your cap. Now if you don't have the benefit of air tools, what you'll want to do is start with your wheel on the ground. And with your wheel on the ground, there's probably three things you're going to want to do. Loosen your lug nuts. Then there's a 35mm bolt in the center that holds the axle into the hub. You're going to want to take the cotter pin and the cover off of that and loosen that 35mm bolt, and also go underneath, and there are 7 13mm 12-point bolts that hold your axle to your front drive, and you'll want to just loosen those 7 bolts. Much easier to loosen all these bolts with your tire on the ground held in place if you don't have all the tools that I have access to. Next, I'm going to remove the stabilizer link, so I'm going to spray the top of it with some penetrating oil and let it sit for a while. Okay, these stabilizer links are sometimes difficult to get apart. You can use hand tools. They will come apart. I just chose to use a impact wrench just to make it easier. I have a 9/16 socket on the bottom and a 14mm socket on the top. Okay, use a hammer and pound down on that bolt, then use a punch, see if you can get it to go down through the sleeve. I end up actually having to use vice grips and a wrench, and obviously you also want to remove the other side so you can move your stabilizer bar around easily. Okay, what I'm going to do here, put a set of vice grips onto this shaft, somewhat tighter here. Okay, now we're going to remove the half shaft of the CV axle, and as I said in the beginning of the video, these are the bolts that if you don't have all the tools that I have, it might be easier to just loosen them while the vehicle's on the ground. You can see I use a big large crowbar to hold the hub in place while I'm loosening those bolts, and you can see I spin it, loosen one of the bolts, spin it some more, loosen another bolt. So if you were actually doing this with your vehicle on the ground, you'd have to probably loosen 1 or 2 of the bolts, then roll your car a little bit, put it in park, put the emergency brake on, loosen a couple more, and keep repeating that process. Okay, once it's unbolted, I'll pull it down and off. Now use a pair of pliers and either break off the ends or just straighten out the cotter pin and pull it out. Okay, 35mm. As I said in the beginning, if you don't have the impact tools, this is easier with the tire on and on the ground. Your other option would be to have a helper hold the brakes while you remove it. So what I like to do is give it one tap and just watch it. See if it moves. Okay, actually it moves pretty freely. You can pull your stabilizer bar up and out of the way. Pull your axle down towards the front.
Okay, and then push it, lift it up, push it out.
Okay, I'm kind of going to speed through putting the half shaft back in. One thing I did forget to do, I do a little bit later, is now is the best time to put the grease fitting on top of the ball joint before you put that axle in there. But put the axle in place, get it into the hub, and then get it lined up on the axle and start a couple of those 13mm bolts. And then once you get all the bolts in, you want to torque them to 60 foot-pounds. And what I do is I use a black marker. I mark the head of them after I torque them. Then you want to kind of go to the opposite side, torque the next bolt, mark it, and just keep going until they're all torqued. Okay, here I'm going to install the sway bar link. I've already put a new link on the other side and just started the nut on it.
Bushing, the bushings always go towards the metal. Okay, so I've got a bushing on the bottom going up to the metal control arm and a bushing above that. Okay, then my shaft goes on there, and then the washer, then the bushing. Okay, push them down and in. Okay, make sure that the bushing is kind of centered in the stabilizer bar here. Okay. Now bushing, then washer. Okay. And then my bolt or nut.
Okay, now you'll want to use your jack, put some pressure on the suspension, and then tighten up the stabilizer to 15 to 17 foot-pounds.
Okay, we'll put on our center nut. And we're just going to tighten it up preliminarily. We're not going to torque it until the wheel's back on.
You can put your tire back on and start each lug nut one by one. Make sure you don't cross thread them. And tighten them down preliminarily.
Torque the lug nuts to 100 foot-pounds using the star pattern. Okay, now using your 35mm socket, torque your hub nut to 220 foot-pounds.
Put the retainer back on, and then the cotter pin, and then your wheel cap. We hope this helps you out. Brought to you by www.1aauto.com, your source for quality replacement parts and the best service on the internet. Please feel free to call us toll-free 888-844-3393. We're the company that's here for you on the internet and in person.